morning. Welcome to episode 177 of Silver Lining for Learning. And today we're going to talk about the power of students. And this is from Digital Promise. And we want to see students have been recognized and acknowledged by many schools and organizations as a very, very powerful source of learning and driving social change. So today we're very fortunate to have a group of students, as well as Ms. Brisa Diaz from Digital Promise, to chat with us about their projects, about what they've done, what they've learned, and how we could do more with students as the driving force of learning. Brisa, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having us. I am one of the researchers with the Center for Inclusive Innovation at Digital Promise. As you may know, Digital Promise is a global nonprofit that works across research, ed tech, and practice to help build learning tools and solutions for educators and students. One of the parts of that effort is updating our challenge map, which is a lot like what it sounds. We are gathering information from district leaders, from school site visits, what we call listening tours, and the League of Innovative Students, which is who we are hosting today, to map different challenges in educational equity across the country and to gather perspectives and resources for possible strategies and solutions to address them. Our goal is to use all of this information to create a network that districts can tap into, so that they can really lean on community and on one another to address all of these challenges. The students here with us here today are part of LOIS, so the League of Innovative Students, where students from different parts of the countries conduct their own research in their own communities. So they do all of it. They conduct the questions, they identify the challenges, they go out looking for survey responses, they talk to their teachers to try to get to tap into different networks so that they can send out those surveys. Then they gather their perspectives from their peers regarding these equity challenges. And then here at Digital Promise, we leverage our platform, our resources to help amplify their voices and their findings even further. Two of the students with us here today were actually able to present at the convening we hosted in the fall. And I think, Yang, you were there and you were very impressed, I hope. That's how we got invited here, where they were able to present to over 200 district leaders about their findings and about possible solutions and what we as adults, using our perspectives, right, how we can tap into student perspectives, because they have so much to share, they have so much insight. And I think it was a fantastic time. I had a great time. I was very inspired, and hopefully they can share some of that inspiration with you all today. And currently we are working on starting round 2 of LOIS with a new cohort of students, and we look forward to we look forward to hearing what they find from their own communities. And I'll hand it over to the students, actually, if you don't mind, to introduce themselves.
Go ahead. Hello, everyone. I'm Haley. Thank you for having me. I'm representing San Ramon Valley Unified School District in California, and I'm currently a senior.
I'm Keani Assad. I'm representing Richland District 2 in the wonderful state of South Carolina, and I'm also a senior.
My name is Julia. I'm also a sophomore, and I'm also in the San Ramon Valley Unified School District in California.
Hi, I'm Netra. I'm also from the San Ramon Valley Unified School District, and I'm a senior.
All right, thanks, everyone. So I see that there's a question, and I don't know if it's for me or for the students, but.
Kurt, go ahead.
Okay, it's not necessarily the first question that you should be asked, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyways. Here I am at Indiana University, the home of the NSE, National Survey of Student Engagement, run for a long time by a famous person named George Koo. And what they try and do is start to understand the level of engagement on college campuses and how much students can participate in their own learning and what happens in informal learning environments that wrap around it. And the NSE is actually formed into the HESI for high school student engagement and community college student engagement and other things, and used around the world. Given what you know and your involvement now in the Digital Promise, any of you, Haley, or any of the 4 of you, or Brisa, if you were to come here to interview, or any campus across the United States, as you get ready for, some of you are seniors, as you get ready to look at universities and colleges to go to in the coming years, if you were to interview faculty members or administrators for the types of learning environments that they provide for their students, what kinds of things would you look for as being important in making your selections in terms of given the types of learning environments you've had? What kinds of things will you now want or now expect to have given your prior experiences? And maybe the question that should be asked before that, what are one or two interesting, exciting, innovative, and engaging kinds of learning activities that you've been involved in during your high school careers? So if you could talk a bit about what you've done and the types of projects or learning activities that you've done, and then what would your expectations be given what you've done?
I can start. What I would expect is flexibility, because I feel like having a very rigorous system, not rigorous, but very strict system that's unable to kind of mold with the current student body is what's setting a lot of people back from reaching their full educational potential, because it feels like we're just going through a system and not really getting to be a part of the education. And it's hard for me sometimes to take in education when it feels like it's not molding to the environment that we are in. I would say one of the best educational experiences I've had, it happens every year, is our Black History Month program at my school. We're known for it throughout all of our districts because we take time after school and we choose topics and we do research on them. I chose filmmaking. I got to choose the topic and I learned about race films, the first Black filmmakers, and how they had to go out of their way to make their own projects and finance themselves. And that has made me appreciate on a deeper level what we've been learning throughout history, because we don't really get to have those opportunities to dig in to what interests us. And by learning what interests us, we get to learn more about the wider conversation. Also, in my social studies class recently, we got to kind of role play as the delegates who were writing the Constitution. And it made us really get into their headspace of what all of these countries, well, not all these countries, all these states were looking for individually and how they were kind of operating on their own. And it helped us get a deeper understanding for how the Constitution came to be in the way it was written. And that's what I really feel like education's missing in recent years is flexibility and understanding that students learn in different ways. We're not just cogs in a machine that can just go through the machine and come out knowing everything we need to know.
And they would have been separate countries had we not had a constitution, right?
Yes, they were acting like that under the Articles of Confederation, and we saw that, and we were able to dig deep into it from their perspectives. It was very interesting.
Thank you, Kiana. Any of the other three people would like to jump in?
I can.
Go ahead.
Are you sure? Okay. I also had a similar experience in my social studies class in government this year. We did a role play of various things, including the Constitution. And just recently we did these like literacy tests that were placed in order to restrict voting rights of several groups a couple decades ago. And just this week we were taking two examples of literacy tests, one in Alabama and one in Louisiana. And it was really interesting to see like how difficult those tests were in the perspective of even people right now who are studying government. Even then it was so difficult. And I don't think a single person in our class passed those tests. So I think it was really, really good perspective on how history really kind of grew since then and how much we really expected out of different groups at the time and how it was used to restrict the rights of some people. And it was a really good perspective. And I think in terms of what I expect from the system and teachers as I go into my first year of college is I really want teachers who are invested in what they do. One of my favorite teachers has been a teacher who taught math with me, and she started every day in class talking about little fun facts or the explanations of patterns. And she really dived deep into every formula that we were learning, not just like the textbook basis of it. And I think that's so important in order to get students engaged. And it's really hard to find teachers like that really go onto the hands-on learning or at least dig deeper into the concepts that they're teaching, not just going on the surface level of what's on the textbook. So those are things that I'd love to see as I go into college.
Really well said, both of you. Haley wanted to jump in, right?
Yeah, I did. On top of flexibility and having, the drive to teach, I also think communication is a huge aspect. When there's a lack of communication or open dialogue between teacher, professor, and students, it's very difficult to be involved in the, like, feel involved in the work you're doing, and I think make good progress towards your learning. In my school, we have a social justice English pathway. It spans all 4 years, and I took it my freshman year, not sure what it was, and I'm so glad I did it because it set me on this path towards a career that I want going forward and a ton of things. But the pathway specifically, it goes into more than just the basics of history and the basics of English, but it looks at different point of views, not just grammatically or not just like the constructs, but we're looking at, from a racial point of view or from, the gender stereotypes that might have been playing in at a specific time period. And as we read these books, we have, the same units that you would have in a regular class, but a different perspective. And sometimes we even add in units, like we just did a hip hop unit this year, and that was extremely exciting to see another way of looking at like lyrics as more of a storytelling and not just a song that people listen to on the radio. It was a different perspective, and I definitely appreciated the way that our teachers interact with us to help us have this all-inclusive learning experience where we can talk about these problems that we're seeing in our society and also interact and show how we connect to this society, we connect to the text more so than just reading a book and analyzing it from there.
Wonderful. We've got to hear from Julia.
I really agree with everything everyone's saying, especially Kayana and Nethra. I really agree with like the whole importance of student interaction and not just students listening to what a teacher has to say, which is also important, but also the importance of students interacting and learning together and not just sitting down and listening to a lecture. I think that's really important. I also too at my school have a social justice and community English pathway. I took that my freshman year, and what's something that I found really, really interesting and made me really passionate about learning was Socratic seminars. I'm sure those are in a lot of different classes, but for me especially in the Justice and Community English class, us having that Socratic seminar for I think our second semester was very, very like interesting to me. I loved how there was a huge emphasis on the teacher not interfering with the conversation at all. It was just students just talking together about a book we were reading. I think the book was Just Mercy. It was a really interesting book about the justice system and kind of how society had a role in all of that. And just being able to talk with other students and really be able to learn from each other. I thought that was a whole different perspective that I haven't really seen before of learning from other students and not just from the teacher. So I think that's something I hopefully will expect in my colleges is that I will want to go into a university or a college that offers that type of interaction with students and that type of learning. So.
Well, Julia, you've kind of got at my follow-up quick question. You've all talked about flexibility, and you had hands-on learning and communication, role play, all that. But if any of you have one critical question that you would ask as you walk into a higher education setting about the learning environment, I don't want to put any of you on the spot, but if any of you have an answer to this question, what would be one question that you would ask that would be really important to find out about in order to make a decision as to whether to enroll in that institution? It would be about learning, about the learning environment. Do any of you want to ponder a possible question that could be asked? If you don't, we can move on to Punya. But
I think I would ask about, I think I would ask about the community and how centered the education is on fostering healthy students that will improve their communities. Because I feel like that's an aspect left out of education because education is kind of treated like a bubble absent of community. So that's something I'm really interested in when I look at colleges.
Great, thank you. Someone else was jumping in, I missed that.
Yeah, the community and engagement, definitely. But I'd probably ask, like, when your students walk away from your class at the end of the year, what do they take away? Was it just a throwaway class? Yeah, I just took it to get rid of, get my credits done. Or do they actually walk out with hands-on experience, with actual knowledge that they can apply to, their future endeavors and just understanding the world around them?
Great. Anyone else going to jump in, or we'll move on to Punya?
I can go. Similar to Haley, instead of talking about or asking about what they feel like going out of the class, I would actually ask what's the reason that they choose to go into the classes they go into? Is it for the purpose of getting a certain qualification, or is it because they're really valuing the community in that class and they feel like that teacher can really offer them something that not other classes can? Because I think the answer to those questions shows what they're really looking for and also what that university values when offering those classes.
Great.
I think for me, the questions I would mostly ask would be centered towards kind of the culture of learning at that school. I know that a lot of different universities have different ways of teaching their students and a lot of different ways students learn in their classes that they offer. For me personally, I really thrive in environments where, like I said, students are interacting with each other, learning from each other. So I think I'd kind of ask more towards about how learning in general is at that school, like is there a lot of student interaction where students are put in situations where they're learning from each other and teaching each other and sharing their own knowledge? I think that's something that's very important to me. So
You should be applying to Indiana then. No, I'm just kidding. Wonderful answers, everyone. I hope you consider Indiana. Punya.
Oh, ASU forever. No, I'm kidding. No. You guys should choose what's right for you. And there are many great schools. That's one of the privileges that we have in this country, I think. So this is really wonderful hearing all the thoughts that you guys shared. But I want to backtrack a little bit. How is this system set up? So maybe Brizab would start with you. Like, I mean, you have this wonderful title, League of Innovative Students. I love that. It's just great. So, how does somebody become part of it? Is it like a partnership that you have with schools? Do individual students sign up? So, once Brisa, you give a little bit of context for that, I would love to hear from each of you as to what motivated you to become a part of this. Was this something that you found out about and you're like, oh, this is going to be exciting, or whatever. I mean, sometimes there are pragmatic reasons, oh, this is going to look good on the CV, which is a very valid reason to do something. Don't get me wrong. As long as it combines with your passions and interests. So I'm just curious about what motivated you to become a part of this project. But maybe Briza, start with you first to give a little bit of context for how this came to be and how does this system work? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So each of these students here are part of one of the, they come from one of the districts that participate in the League of Innovative Districts that Digital Promise hosts. The League, as it's called just for short, is a cohort of districts. And I think we're at about 200 districts, right? One for each district lead. And they are a cohort and they come together to build network and to strive and to address different equity challenges within their own communities and also to help each other out with these strategies and really just have a big think tank of all of these districts really trying to move in the same direction, right? So these students were recruited from those districts. We would love to have and expand outside of those, but because we already have a relationship with them and we have that trust, because at the end of the day, they are students and they need to be protected. They're intellectually, right, and just privacy, they need to be protected. So because we already have that relationship with the districts, we go ahead and we recruited from there. I don't have much information about the recruitment of the students from there. I was brought in a little bit after that had already been started, so they can share that with you. But they are all a part of League districts, and then now they are the League of Innovative Students. That is a branch.
So just a quick follow-up on that before we hear from the students about how they recruited and why they got in. So is this like a network where the schools, like how is it funded? I mean, is it something that, because, I'm just asking because these are institutional sort of situations where there is a deeper economic rationale that needs to be covered. Right. Do schools pay to be a part of this, or are you covered by grants? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think actually Yang might be able to provide more insight to that as a board member. But from what I understand, there are membership fees. Digital Promise does host it, right? And we are the ones that coordinate and do a lot of the research behind it. But there are membership fees that are put in from the district. However, it is striving to be as diverse, to diversify the districts that it has, right? Because we want to be truly representative of the country and of the communities that build up our country. And that means that different resources, right? That's one of the struggles that we have as a country, is that different districts and even schools within a district have different resources available to them. So we do try to diversify, but it is a membership. It is an application. Yeah, it's a districts apply. They are brought in, they're expected, there are certain expectations put on them as participants, and then there are membership fees from what I understand.
Well, Brisa, typically, Digital Promise is funded by grants,
Mhm.
donations, and it's a huge organization. I know Verizon's given a lot of money, and they get a lot of NSF money, and I think they get started. But also schools pay a fee. But I mean, you guys have so many projects, so this is just one of them. But I just really want to follow up with Punya's. I was wondering how the students are organized in school. Do you have teachers working with you, or are you just on your own, or do you work with the Brisa? I was just curious. Punya's asking a great question.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I
how
can
did you do
provide,
it? Yeah,
yeah.
let's hear from the students. Yeah, I would love to
Yeah.
hear from.
So from what we speak with district representatives that are in contact with us in regards to students and recruitment, I think they have their advisors, their league advisors that students can provide. But once that happens, we have meetings a few times a year. They were all part of the pilot LOIS program. We are now in the second round of LOIS. So we are meeting a little bit more frequently. The structure is a little bit different, but they were recruited and then we met together to walk through the process of creating the research project. But they can tell you about how it started, how they started off in LOIS.
So for me, I heard about Lois. I think my dad kind of told me about this program or this League of Innovative Students. And the reason why I was so interested in it is I've been a part of San Ramon Valley Unified School District since I think I was in kindergarten, so kind of through preschool to elementary school to middle school to high school. So being a sophomore now, I've really come to understand my personal school district and kind of the areas that we could improve on. And I've just come to really understand where we can grow and where we can start to diversify and start to, kind of mold the district to more of our students' needs. Being a student here, I kind of have a good understanding as well of like other students' needs and what other students want for themselves, especially coming closer to college and, our own careers and focusing on our own careers. So yeah, that because I've been a part of the school district for so long, when I heard that it was not just within California, but within the whole nation, and that it was going to be a collaborative process with students all over the country. I got really excited because I really wanted to collaborate with students that weren't just in my district, because I haven't been in more than one school district. So being able to hear the voices of students across the country, different parts of the nation, I just really, really wanted to dive deep into that process with other students as well to hear about what they had to say.
For me, I heard of, well, let me start at the beginning. I joined student council because I actually wanted to address a lot of problems we were having. We just returned to school from the COVID pandemic where we were all at home. And there was that TikTok trend where kids were coming in and stealing things from the school and filming it. And it was just a big issue. We couldn't use half of the bathrooms on campus. So I went to join student council because I really wanted to address it. And I walked in and every student, including the advisors, said, that's really nothing we can do about it. We can't really try to address it. So I walked out of our first meeting because I got really kind of upset. And then I heard about Lois and I was like, is this going to be another one of those groups that only want us to be there to pretend to be student leaders, or are we actually going to be able to cause a change? So I took a chance and I signed up, and I've been so excited ever since because they promised me opportunities to speak with district leaders, to do more research into why these things are happening, and to talk with students from across the country. And I've learned so much from all of these students and their different perspectives here that I feel very good about joining Lois.
Thank you. I remember that trend, and I remember like beating my head. I'm like, what is going on here? I mean, I couldn't imagine what it meant to be a school administrator at that time when that was happening. So yeah, thank you for reminding. Oh God. Anyway, please, the others.
I'll speak because I also from San Ramon Valley, like Julia, and I also agree with her. I joined because I really wanted to get involved with students and just people across the country. I'm part of the equity steering committee at my district, and I'm also a president of a restorative justice coalition. And it's a lot of work within the district that it's super exciting work, and it's a lot of work that I'm glad to be doing, but it's very contained. And I wanted to see if I could, expand and see what other people are doing in other parts of the country, and how I can maybe integrate this back into my school, or how I can spread what I'm doing to other parts of the country. Because I think it's very valuable. And there's more students than there are administration and staff. So I know we have a stronger voice if we really just brought ourselves together. And I think this was a great opportunity for that.
I think all of the others said it really well. And for me, it was also a really similar experience. A lot of the other work I've done with student voice and student government before joining Lewis, it was either on a smaller scale, like at the state level or the local level compared to this program, or like everyone else was saying, it's kind of contained and you were more so there to offer your voice, but not really to let that the ideas you have materialize into something tangible or an actual solution in front of you. So when I heard about Lois, I thought not only was it a great opportunity to bring this discussion to a national scope outside of a district that I've been in my entire life, like Julia, but I think it was also a great way to dive into the research process that's driving most of these educational challenges and solutions to them that a lot of education leaders are able to do, but not many students know about the process of diving into. So I thought not only would it enrich my experiences with the work I would love to do, but it would really enrich the discussion overall. And I was also lucky to attend the conference that happened, the convening a couple months ago. And those two in combination, the program, the research with the convening, I think it's an invaluable experience that I won't really get another one like this.
So I know Chris is ready with the question, but I just want a quick follow-up for the four of you. Did you guys know each other before this meeting now, or is this the first time you're meeting each other?
We met on a phone call just to prep, but I met
Okay.
Nithra in person during the convening, and she actually
Okay.
gave me a lot of ideas to bring back to my school. So I was very happy meeting her there.
Well, I'm glad that we had an opportunity for you guys to meet up. So, but thank you for your responses. And Chris, I know you've been waiting.
So I'm thinking about when I was your age, which was literally 6 decades ago, and what was then and what is now. And actually, the world was very turbulent 6 decades ago. A presidential assassination, a president being impeached, the civil rights movement, the Cold War, Vietnam. I mean, it was a comparable time in terms of a lot of disruption. But unlike you, we didn't talk about any of that stuff in school. And in fact, I think that the closest in history I got from school was about 1890. That was sort of when they ran out of time. And of course, that wasn't very useful. So my reflection on listening to you is that we should teach history backwards. We should teach history in terms of what's happening today. And then you say, well, but wait, something 15 years ago really kind of led to what's happening today. But wait, something a generation before that really created what happened 15 years ago. You'd still get to the history, but the emphasis would be where it should be, which is on causation and the present, as opposed to memorizing a million facts and figures. So I envy you the kind of teachers you have, and I wish it would lead to a reconceptualization of how history would be taught across the board. My question is, we've had a couple host reflections recently. Every now and then, instead of having guests, we just talk to each other. And in the last two host reflections, one of the things that's come up is the extraordinary amount of conflict in the world at every level: international, national, local, within families. It's just a difficult time. And I'm wondering if you're learning any strategies for conflict resolution. Because one thing is clear, and that is that a whole bunch of people were let down by the education system in terms of learning any kind of conflict resolution. And now we're harvesting the fruits of that in this incredibly contentious and dangerous society. So I'm wondering to what extent, different points of view are coming out, different points of view are accepted, where people disagree with one another, there's strategies to help them not go to war with one another, and so on. Just any reflections that you have on that.
I can go ahead and start. This is a great question. There is tons of conflict, and I have a lot of classes that discuss this all the time. Conflict resolution, of course, when you're looking at war, that's very difficult to teach through that, how to resolve these issues. But just in general, when it comes to opposing ideas and opinions, especially in the age of social media, is do your research and just talk to people and not argue, but talk. You can have healthy debates, and that's normal. I was talking with my parents too recently, and they're reflecting on their lives. They're older than me, obviously, and they're like, yeah, we used to be able to have political conversations, and my teachers have said this as well. Now it's like, if we're looking at politics specifically, you either stand on the far left or the far right, and it's very difficult to talk. People don't want to have the conversation, they just want to prove that they're right. And so it's really just about connecting with the other person and understanding that everyone's coming from their own point of view. We just have to talk through that and try to understand the other person. And like with social media, where everything you see is mostly just polarized, there's really nothing in the middle. You just can't believe everything you see, and you really shouldn't use social media as your number one source. And if you do have it as a source, make sure you fact check it, because there's a lot of misinformation that goes around. And that's really what starts a lot of the conflict, is because people latch onto these false ideas and just own it as, their own thing. That is their identity, and that's it. So, yes.
As someone from a very, very southern state, South Carolina, we love our states' rights over here when we talk about the Civil War and stuff like that. I feel like in our education system, broadly, we have been kind of taught not to talk about politics in any way, because that is what leads to conflict. Like, politics is the conflict in and of itself, which is what led to a lot of students. In my research, I looked into this a lot. What led to a lot of students thinking that there are things that exist that are non-political. So when you talk about stuff that is very clearly, overtly political, that they cannot deny, they try to avoid it. And that leads us to not really understanding how to resolve conflict when it arises. And I think that schools need to open up more to having these conversations and teaching these skills to students, because the main skill they learn is avoidance. And that really hasn't gotten us anywhere, except for people to be quietly radicalized without having anybody to bounce their ideas off of.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think with my school, there is, when it comes to students being able to talk with each other about opposing point of views and opposing opinions about certain topics. I think that we've had some experience having those conversations, those healthy debates in school or in clubs like MUN or debate club. There has been some experience with that, but I think that the important factor that's missing here is having these conversations about real world topics, and not just about a book that we're reading in class or something that's happened before in history, but something that's actually happening in our world today that we need to talk about. I think that's something that's kind of missing when it comes to being able to have these conversations, these controversial conversations, because there is a huge importance in that. And that's how we start to approach these real world problems when we're adults, and when we are possibly in these situations where we are the ones who have to help resolve real world conflicts. So I think with the way schools can start to approach the situation is finding ways for students to have healthy conversations about real world issues and maybe even politics, honestly, because I think that schools, like Keona said, are a little bit frugal with the type of conversations we have regarding politics. I think honestly at this point, maybe we should talk about it, because we can't just avoid that politics is happening and we can't talk about it in schools. I think that maybe students should even start to learn more about that in a school setting.
I completely agree. And I it got me thinking about how in elementary school, for example, even though we didn't indirectly include politics, I think conflict resolution was actually a really big part of learning when we were younger. I remember my teachers used to tell me, like, imagine your anger as a balloon and you shouldn't let your balloon pop. And that's like one of the most, like, I think, relevant strategies and things that people really remember and take from elementary school, because it's really on that really simple level, the strategies that we have that we often forget, because the lessons that we gain when we're younger are invaluable. And I think now when we go into high school, the discussion becomes a lot harder because it's more polarized and politicized. And actually, in my classes, we don't really talk about the conflicts that are happening in the world a lot. I gain most of that discussion through speech and debate. And that's where I'm really allowed to engage on both sides of the discussion. But in school, yes, we have strategies like Socratic seminars and things like that, that I think teachers are also using to encourage a really healthy debate and discussions, like Haley was saying, was necessary. But I think that at the same time, it doesn't really directly go into the politics and the conflicts. Those kind of seem like a separate world that schools and teachers don't want to engage with because it can be so polarizing. And I think that's why having more of those discussions is really important, like everyone is saying, and also really stressing on the idea that your reality isn't the only reality. I think that's often forgotten. And I think also it makes it a lot easier for teachers to conduct those discussions if they think about that. Because as long as you're including both sides or multiple sides of the spectrum and the conversation, you're never really going to be isolating one side out. And I think that's just the easiest way to make sure that you're really including all the perspectives and worldviews in that discussion. And while it might be really hard to do that, or you can't really do it immediately, especially with social media's influence, I think those small steps are really important to making sure that we still keep school relevant in some sense to the world that our students are seeing today.
I'd like to
Oh,
add on, oh, sorry. I'd
no,
like
no,
to
go
add
ahead,
on
please.
that in school, I think it's important to remember when we're talking about politics, if we do have these conversations, that opinions are not, they don't exist in a void, and that they can cause material harm to people if they are enacted. Because I do think that is an issue when it comes to these debates, is that some people will argue as if it doesn't affect people if these policies go into place, if their ideas go into action. I do think that is an issue when it comes to conflict resolution, that people don't think of that, and they get very on their side and they don't think about how it affects the outside world. And it's hard to resolve conflict with some people who don't really see material harm. Even though it is important to engage opinions, I do think it's important for teachers to teach that opinions are not just something that exists in your mind. They can affect the broader scope of society.
Well, I just want to thank all of you for those very thoughtful answers. I wish most adults were as reflective about these issues as you are, and gives me hope for the next generation to maybe do a better job than many of us have done.
Wonderful answers, actually. It's a great question, Chris. You know, Chris each week gets me to think about history with his perspective. And as he'll remember, in the 60s, WTMJ Channel 4 and WTMJ Radio would be broadcasting all the civil and rights issues that were happening in the day, the Vietnam body bags coming in through the airport in Milwaukee, and the Father Grappy marches and so forth. You know, those are, you know, I was a few years younger than him, but they're still resident in my brain. Going through those times, I'm seeing my uncle's car beaten up. He had gone through the riots and almost died. You know, those stick in your mind and your memories. And, you know, I always thought to myself, I want to be a history teacher. And listening to Chris gets me even more excited. I get to teach history backwards, you know, from the present to the past. It'd be really a really big challenge. Maybe my next occupation. But what I've been writing notes down for the last 45 minutes or 40 minutes in here is a more practical question than I asked earlier. And that is, and you kind of alluded to it with Punya's question, I'm wondering about the sharing that's taking place between the students and the instructors in Digital Promise. What kinds of pathways are available for the sharing that doesn't just happen on Silver Line for Learning, but happens on a weekly or monthly basis? Is there some kind of global network that's been set up? Is there a project galleries of student work that others who are listening to this broadcast today or down the road, they'll be on a podcast format, so they'll be able to listen anytime. Those who are listening to the show can take a look at those projects, can say, oh, I think our school district should get involved in Digital Promise, or I think our school, if it's not involved, we can create something like it. Or we might want to attend the similar events or conferences. I mean, Breeza might be able to tell us, are there events that people who are getting excited here, listening to Silver Lining, can follow up, and what can they do to follow up? And maybe any of the students could answer that too. And how do you communicate? How do you become aware of each other's projects?
Yeah, so it's funny you should ask. That's exactly the objective for the challenge map, actually. So in all of our work at Digital Promise, we strive to embrace the perspectives and tap into the perspectives of as many stakeholders or community members with our partners as possible, right? And that goes beyond talking just to district leaders. I referenced them earlier because they are the ones that represent their districts in the league and at the league convenings. But in general, in all of our work, we really do try to embrace every level, I don't want to say level, every branch of a community and all the work that we do, right? Especially speaking as a researcher, that's what makes the work valuable, right? That making sure that it's not just hearing from the same people over and over again. So those are the individual, that's how it looks, that's what it looks like as at the individual project level at Digital Promise, that we really try to embrace those values. Going back to the challenge map, that's what we want to do. It is a work in progress, so we are working towards it. But we do want to create that network, and there is a goal to eventually even map out the projects at Digital Promise according to this challenge map. So if you go on to Digital Promise's website, you can find the challenge map there as it is currently. We are working on updating it. And so what we've done so far is we've done we've done surveys with the League of Innovative District Leaders to hear what they have to say, what they've seen to be the biggest equity challenges at their own in their own areas. We are doing listening tours, which is when we're partnering with districts and to really go in and get on the ground, right? We want to hear from parents. We want to hear from community members who might not have students in the district, but are still part of the community. We want to hear from educators. We want to hear from the district leaders. We want to hear from the school leaders. And so all of this information, we want to feed it into a web. And if you go onto the website, on the Digital Promise website, to look at the challenge map, there is currently a very cool visual that has different bubbles, and you can filter it by stakeholder group. So look at the challenges from the perspective of students, which ones are the most important, which ones are not as important, from district leaders, from community members, from educators. And so we are working to feed into this, to create this web, to create this space where we can tap into. So eventually all of the students' lowest projects will be published onto our website so that they can be used. And the idea is, for example, if a couple of students here did projects on content areas for classes, right? That they want classes that are not just the general topics, that they want them more specific to their interest and also to the local area, right? Like what their interests are, what they want to pursue as a career or in college, at a four-year university. So the idea would be to have that as one of the challenges, and then to have resources that show what have districts done already that has worked, or maybe that it hasn't worked to address this challenge. What are students saying about this? What are different projects at Digital Promise saying about this? What are other nonprofits that are available to help address the same challenge? So we are working on it. I'm glad you asked. That is something that we are progressing towards, and we're trying to get it done as quickly as possible because we do see the value in it. And districts are asking us a lot, like, we don't want just the resources. We want to hear from people that have been there before. We want to hear from people that are working towards it, because that's where the power, right? Why reinvent the wheel, or why do the same work over and over again when we can create these communities and these think tanks towards to find solutions and strategies. That was a very long answer.
That's a great answer. But maybe one of the students would like to put an addendum on it, add some comments about what Risa has said. Would any of you like to add anything?
mean, I
Well,
would definitely say, oh, sorry.
go ahead, Haley. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I definitely think that the most powerful day of all the meetings we had was the final day that we had, where everyone shared out what they had done, and you got to hear how your work related to others, or what other areas people were investigating, and the results that they got from their research, and what students across the country were thinking. And that was very exciting because it wasn't just, your own project that you're looking at. You got to see what everyone else from, different minds, different perspectives came up with, and how those results were turning out.
So
Oh,
go ahead, Kona.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to add on, getting to hear from other students' perspectives has put into perspective just how isolated my school was in terms of APs. We just had the basics. In terms of languages, we just had the two, French and Spanish. And I was listening to Nethra at the conference, and she was talking about digging into math more, having more expanded APs. And I immediately ran back to my principal and I wrote down like all of the APs that people were talking about, all of the different languages, including sign language, Korean, all of these, because I was so inspired from the students across the country and what they were learning from. And I was like, why are we in South Carolina being so isolated when we have so many opportunities where we could expand and teach students things that they will internalize more?
Excellent, excellent. Julia or Nithra?
I kind of wanted to add on to Haley and Keona. I think that, yeah, what Haley said about that day where we were, all as students, a part of the League of Innovative Students, were sharing our presentations on our research as we surveyed our own schools, on our own topic. We had our own topics that we were researching on. For me, it was about diversifying our curriculum and having more passion-driven classes for students. I think Haley's was something about politics in school. So we kind of all had our own topics that we were researching and surveying students at our school for. So that day where we all were able to share our presentations on what stood out to us from our survey results, solutions that kind of came out of that, kind of not only what we had to say as students a part of this league, but what all of the students at our school had to say about the topic we were researching on. So it kind of just exponentially grew the perspective that we were looking through when approaching how to improve our school district. So I thought that it was just a really eye-opening day to be able to see not just through fellow League of Innovative students, but to also look through all of their classmates and all of their peers and what they had to say as well.
Julia, it's just a wonderful answers every time. I can't believe you're a sophomore. It sounds like you're ready to graduate. Nithra.
I also felt the exact same way, and actually similar to Kayana's experience. And I was listening to Kayana at the convening talk about her educational experience, and I think specifically the politics discussion that was happening as well, the lack thereof. I thought that there were so many differences in how my school district was and how hers, but also how similar some things were. I liked the lack of the discussion on political subjects, and I thought that both that at the convening as well as what Haley and Julia were talking about, we got to talk about our research projects at the end. It's just so enriching to talk about these discussions on a national level with students that you don't necessarily talk to other than in a space like this. And also students who are equally as invested in talking about it. You can always talk about it maybe to a friend or if a teacher at your school, but you're not it doesn't always guarantee you're going to get the same level of investment into improving education and enlightening student voice as you are when you get to talk with students at the League of Innovative Students. So I thought that that was really, really valuable. And also on top of the student voice, I thought, especially at the convening and with Digital Promise as a whole, it was really interesting to hear from a researcher's point of view like Riza and the point of view of teachers and educators at the convening as well, because when we're talking about student voice, we often make it so that it's the demands, I guess, and needs of the students, but oftentimes it's kind of hard for our teachers and educators to meet those demands, especially because like Chris was saying, they lived in a really different world of education than us, and they learned really differently from us. And applying new ways, especially with the conversation of AI, which was the highlight of the conference, the convening, applying those new strategies in education can be difficult for a teacher to do. And that's something that I think is not often talked about, at least within student groups. So I thought not only did I learn from a lot of students, but I learned about including teachers and educators' voices and researchers' voices, because they have a very different viewpoint of how we view these educational challenges and the solutions to them. And their voice is equally as important in making sure that we're all comfortable in the sphere of education.
You know, I want to really make sure I got a question since I invited you guys. Okay, so this is you bring something we don't normally get. On this show, we invited students. We had students from Australia, from China, from Hong Kong, from Nepal, from the US, various places. But you can tell, we are decades kind of older than you guys. So even our children are grown up. So we don't get to talk to the young generation as today. So you brought a kind of real fresh air to our thinking. And that's why everybody's jumping in, asking you questions. So I want to thank you because you're thoughtful. You give me hope. I always thought my retirement would be bad, but now with you guys, I think I'll have a more peaceful and prosperous retirement. And thank you. What impresses me most is your desire to go beyond your school, your own experience, to explore, to understand other things. I have always kind of have this argument that learning has escaped the classroom. That means learning does not really stay in the classroom anymore. But schools continue to try to control you in the classroom. Okay, don't tell your teachers I said that, but anyway, they can watch this show. So I have been arguing for students should drive their own learning for a long time. And it's possible to do that now with AI, with ChatGPT. And without that, you could still do that. And also, when you mentioned about how social media could carry a lot of, bad stories and bullying, all kind of things, crazy stuff. But you seem to have the right mindset. You guys seem to be doing the right things. So now my question really has to do with I'm debating. I have too many questions, but Ampunia has a closing question. So let me ask you another question. Actually, is I have been organizing a project since the COVID pandemic, which I call HIP, called Human Interdependence Project. I've been trying to get students from different countries to create projects that demonstrate how human beings are interdependent. No matter where you are, we're interconnected, we're interdependent. And it's a global project. So I was just wondering about really the time you have doing this a digital promise, because one of the problems we always have is that, as I was talking about, school curriculum always controls you. Like you're talking about AP, you're talking about the SAT, ACT, all these kind of crazy things. So how do you find time to do this project? Does it count towards your credit? Is it part of your school thing, or do you have to carve out the time to do it? If you could you go convince your school principal to say, make it this is my English class. So I'm just interested in doing this. What could you do? I really believe you can change something. You can go convince your teacher. For math, I'm just doing my thing here. So just tell us about the freedom you might have, the time you have to spend, because I'm sure your parents are pressuring you to get good grades, get good test score, to go to good college. Just share with us your context, with the specific answers to my questions or something that your life is about. Thank you, guys. Anyone? Yeah.
Well, at my school, I'm known as Miss Busy. I swear I see everybody in the hallways and they're like, you're always so busy, Kayana. We never see you anymore. But it's always because I'm working on a project. With Lois, I usually have to carve out time either after school or on my weekends to kind of sit down and write a plan. Or if I have time in between classes, I'll be working on either analyzing data from a research project I've done or looking deeper into what type of questions I want to ask or building up more things I want to know from my student body. As our head producer of our news show, I'm always interested in hearing what our students have to say. So even though I'm Miss Busy, I'm in every club in our school. I'm always open to doing more work. And that's why I love working with Lois, even if I have to take time out of my weekend. I just love having things to do like that, especially if I'm improving life for my fellow students.
Yeah, with what Kayana said, I think it's with me similarly. I think it's really, it depends on how passionate the student is about what they're trying to make time for. Um, Being in my sophomore year, I'm starting to take more APs and honors classes, so my schedule is looking a lot different than it did freshman year. Having a lot more homework, a lot more tests to prepare for, and my extracurriculars as well. Time management has been something really that I've had to implement this year for myself. So, but finding things outside of school like Lois that I need to make time for, um, the time I made for it really depended on how much like how passionate I was for Lois. And because I am passionate for Lois and what they stand for and the work I've done with everybody here, it really has driven me to like devote some of my weekends to work on my presentation for my challenge map findings. And with my survey that I made for the project, I definitely had to find some time and make some sacrifices with certain classes and everything to make sure I could go to all of the meetings, the lowest meetings, and to make sure that I distributed my survey to all of the students as possible. So yeah, I think it really depends on like how inspired you make a student to join your program or join your project. I think that's kind of what's most important about that.
I had the same experience as Julia, and I completely agree. I had to take some time off from my classes and make some time on the weekends after school and during class to go ask some teachers to distribute my survey. But I never felt like it was something that I had to really feel stressed about necessarily, because at the same time, I was so invested in the project that each step of the way, as I kept gaining more data and as I kept going on and discovering new analysis with the research I had done, it felt even easier to feel motivated to continue with my research. And especially after looked at the findings of my research, mine was focused on administration, student communication, whether basically administration, like principals, counselors, do students feel like they're taking action on the concerns they have? And especially after seeing that a lot of students don't feel like administration takes actions on those concerns, not only did it make me question how we construct our school environments, but it drove me even further to spend more time on my project. And there were mistakes I made along the way and ways I could have done my research and data collection better. But at the same time, I think because it really enriched my perspectives on how this school environment is, specifically in my district, I thought that all the time I spent was really worth it.
Yeah, I agree with everyone. It's just about carving out some time and shifting things around in time management. And touching on one of the like first questions we had today is what do I value from teachers is communication. I've had some very amazing teachers these past few years that understand that the work that I'm doing, whether it's Lois or other projects, it's not just, hey, I haven't had to turn in assignments late, but if it came down to that, it'd be, hey, it's not, I'm just sitting around on the couch, watching TV, scrolling on my phone. Like I'm doing a lot of work here. Could you be a little more flexible maybe with, the time constraints, which hasn't really happened, but that they have that open communication as long as you're working with your teachers, whether it's to make it to the meeting or just communicating about how can I get the survey out to everyone? How can you help me? And that communication and that community definitely helps me pursue all the projects that I want to. Because I mean, you can always make time for things that you're passionate about, but it usually means cutting something else out. So if you have a good community surrounding you, it just makes it all the more possible.
Punya, go ahead with your last question. We can have a quick.
Sure. So again, I just want to reiterate what the other host said. Thank you so much for joining us. And as Zhao said, like these sort of strong, powerful, hopeful voices. Just loved hearing all of you. And I'm sure, Briza, this for you is like waking up every day to work with people like this must be so deeply meaningful and inspirational. So thank you again for joining us, Briza, as well. So I have a slightly different question. You guys talked about how busy you guys are. It's clear. I mean, I have kids who have gone through high school. In fact, I had a video when we were doing a school design project where I had my daughter describe just her day. She was in high school at that time, and a lot of adults and parents don't realize how regimented and structured we have made our children's lives. How packed. I mean, what was mind-boggling to many people was that high school students in some ways are busier than lots of adults who come back home at 5 o'clock and then you're done. You don't have homework or project work or whatever to do. So I'm just curious, and we are running short of time here and out of time, but I would love to hear from you what you guys do for fun. What's the thing that that you do that gives you pleasure? That we are all complete human beings at some level. I mean, I love, for instance, I edit the videos for this show. That is my fun on a Saturday. It's a weird fun, doesn't make sense to most people, but that it rejuvenates me in some way. So I'd love to hear from each of you. What's fun? What do you enjoy?
One of my passions is writing. I love writing poetry in my spare time. But recently, and what I'm going to school for is filmmaking. That is my favorite thing to do. It is the love of my life. Whenever I see something beautiful, I have to take a video of it, whether I have to go edit later or just keep collecting film. It is my favorite thing to do, and it just brings me so much peace.
Awesome.
For me, my getaway from school is definitely art. I love to paint. I paint a lot, honestly, whenever I'm stressed or whenever I feel very overwhelmed. Whenever I have any time, I try my best to kind of convert this stress into a painting, if that makes sense. It really helps me get into a completely different headspace and really decompress after how stressful school can be with all the classes I'm taking, with my schedule, my hectic schedule. So also being able to do that and express myself creatively, honestly, having these classes in school, I haven't even been able to take an art class in school yet because of the APs and honors classes I'm taking. So being able to at least do it at home means a lot to me. So that's what I like to do in my free time.
I can go next. I've been
Yeah.
lucky that the extracurriculars I've done have actually been kind of like my free time and my release. Because I've just found things that I love. So it doesn't really feel like a checklist for an extracurricular, more so feels like things I just love investing my time in. But I think apart from my extracurriculars, something I've always loved is reading. And I don't get to read as much as I do before especially in elementary and middle school, I used to have a ton of time to read every day. But now, especially on weekends, like in the night, maybe at 11 o'clock before I go to sleep, I'll just have my book open and I'll read. And I think that's one of my favorite ways to really decompress and at the same time gain new perspectives and viewpoints. Of they may not always be real viewpoints, but I think they're still viewpoints all the same.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I'm with Nithra here. I have always loved reading, and yeah, the time is definitely getting shorter in high school, but I've come to love reading about perspectives, like she said, but like politics. So it sounds boring to all my friends, and they kind of judge me for it, but it's very interesting reading what one person has to say and another person on the same exact issue, and how both points are equally valid. And on top of that, I also play softball, and I'm committed to playing college. And it's just a great way to just get outside and clear your mind and just have some fun with people. And it's just in your day, like you just have to do it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Who's introducing the next show?
That'd be me.
All right, Kurt, go for it.
Again, thank you all for coming. This week has been a wonderful week. Thank Young for organizing it. We have episode 178 next week, the Rwanda Wildlife Filmmaking Course documenting mountains of gorillas. That will be at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. if you're in Rwanda, and 8 a.m. if you're on the West Coast, Young. So please come and join us. And Kiana, that's filmmaking. So please come next week. We hope to see you there. Thanks again, everyone.